Welcome back to our course on scaling your AI startup in under 6 weeks. My name is Yanni. I'm a growth partner here at Thinkk, and I appreciate taking the time to be with us. Today, we're going to talk about management, one of my favorite topics when it comes down to actually running a company. In other words, what does it look like to lead a team? What does it look like to actually trust your employees? And how do we go about actually making great decisions for the company? This is what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into it, remember a couple things. The first one is you have to understand who you're talking to when you're getting any sort of information. And so the source of our credibility is twofold. The first one comes from my decade plus of experience working in, launching, founding, advising, investing, doing a whole bunch of other amazing things with different startups and different companies. The second one comes from Thinkk's expertise, having launched or advised on over 45 different AI startups last year in 2024. And so everything you're going to be learning here is going to be based on data driven insights and proven results. So let's talk about what it actually means to be a leader, what it means to lead your company, and what that actually looks like at scale. When you're a small startup founder and you're just getting involved, you're doing a lot of things. You're getting involved in everything. In fact, you're sitting there and doing the marketing and you're doing the sales and you're doing all these different things. But what happens is as your company continues to grow, your role as a leader is going to change over time. And so the way that I want you to think about this is no longer that you're going to wear every hat in the business, but rather that you are going to be a conductor. Okay. So what you are going to do is be strictly being the number one capitalist that has ever walked the earth. Okay. You are going to be allocating four types of capital. Okay. Think about it as playing chess with all these different pieces. And you're going to be allocating human capital, which are your employees and your talents and your team members, your financial capital, so any sort of cash and other equivalents that your business might have, technological capital, which might be things like laptops and tech and code and all these different things, as well as with natural capital. And so that might be things like even assets or raw materials or anything else. And the thing that you want to be doing here is sitting there and just playing chess with these pieces to say that, okay, when I combine this and this and this is what the end result is. And so think of yourself as a conductor, think of yourself as a capital allocator, not anything else. And keep in mind, some of the best CEOs in history have actually voiced the same thing. Think about Jack Ma of Alibaba, one of China's biggest companies. He is very famous for going on record and saying, I am not the smartest guy in the room, and I'm not very smart to begin with. But what I do know how to do is get very, very smart people in the room together and give them the resources to do their job. So this is really important, and it's a great way to think about it. Remember, at scale, you cannot do everything in the company. The best thing to do is sit back, allocate different forms of capital, and make sure that the allocation actually creates a lot of value for people. Remember that some of the greatest CEOs to ever walk the earth, people like Jeff Bezos, have actually pioneered something called a two-way door and a one-way door decision framework. And it's a very straightforward concept. And what it basically says is that not all decisions are created equal. And therefore, you should have slightly different frameworks when it comes down to making different decisions. Two-way doors are decisions which are easily reversible, and one-way doors are decisions which are not. You can think of two-way doors as being installing a mini fridge in the office, or choosing a marketing headline for your campaign, or let me think what else. Or holding like a game night on Thursday nights or something. These are very reversible decisions. And so when it comes down to a very reversible decision, just make them quickly. Don't deliberate on them. There's no need to delegate or do anything. Just go ahead and make the decision and be done with it. The second is what's called a one way door. In other words, they're doors that when you walk through, they're very difficult to go back through the other end. This might be something like choosing a new supplier for your business, killing a product line, or entering a new market. And so when it comes down to decisions like these, you want to make sure that you actually sit down and take the time to deliberate. Take your sweet time. Ask your employees, ask the people that are around you, and make sure that you make a good decision on this because they are very difficult to undo once done. It's also critically important to trust your team. Okay. This is something that we hear about all the time. And it's funny because we actually hear about this a lot from companies that are fairly large. Leaders will always tell me that nobody does it as well as me and nobody's going to care about the business like you. And maybe that's actually true to a certain extent. But if you want to go far, you need to go with other people. Fine. If you want to be right, go by yourself. But if you want to be somebody that can actually go ahead and build a great vision, you need to go ahead and do it with other people. And so it's very important to put trust in the team that you go ahead and build. There is no sense to go ahead and build an entire team to then go ahead and tell them what to do or to micromanage them the whole time. Completely defeats the point of delegation. So make sure that you're bringing your people on board and that you're giving them the trust to go ahead and operate. I did want to share one quote actually that a founder went ahead and told me one time, which is that he said, I spent 3 years building a business where I trusted no one. And I pretty much built exactly what I feared, aka a business where nobody could be trusted. So, in other words, make sure that you're trusting people, make sure that you're hiring them, because more often than not, the issue with actually trusting your team is not whether or not they're trustworthy. It typically is a problem with you as a leader not being able to put trust in people. And if you don't believe me, let me put it like this. If you are actively hiring untrustworthy people, the issue is not the people and it's not you, but it's actually your hiring practices. So the question becomes, are your hiring practices actually allowing you to bring on people that you don't trust? Okay. Or is the issue more in yourself and your own inability to trust other people? And 90% of the time, it actually is the second one. So if you don't trust people, make sure that you understand it comes down to you and your own inability to trust and operate as a great leader rather than somebody else's ability to not be trustworthy. Because if they're truly not trustworthy, you shouldn't have brought them on board. And again, that boils down to your hiring practices. And again, that boils down to you. So again, this is something you need to take your own responsibility for. Make sure that when you do bring people on board, you give them authority, you give them trust, and you let them make decisions in the organization. And do not micromanage them. It's going to kill their motivation. Another thing to go ahead and steal from the Bezos playbook here is something that he called disagree and commit. And this is a really powerful concept. And basically, what it states is that not everybody in the organization is always going to agree on the course of action. And that's normal because you also don't want everybody to agree on the course of action. In fact, you're better off having a few people that disagree with you so that you can actually make sure that you're walking the right direction. But in order to keep the company just from getting tied up in endless debates, one of the things that they encourage at Amazon is something that they call disagree and commit. In other words, if somebody has a great history of being a good decision maker, you are much better off just conceding and saying, you know what, I don't necessarily understand why you feel the way that you do, even though we've talked about it extensively. I don't necessarily feel that that's the best action. However, I'm going to put my own feelings to the side here and I'm going to commit and I'm going to do everything in my power to actually go ahead and help you build that vision because I know that you have a great history of being a good decision maker. And I think it's better for the company to go ahead and move forward in a certain direction rather than just going ahead and keeping us tied up in endless debates. And so the way that you do this is fairly straightforward. You're sitting down in a meeting, everybody will share their perspectives. People are going to debate it thoroughly. And then once a direction is chosen, everybody's going to actually sit there and commit to it. Nobody's sitting there bad mouthing anybody. Nobody's sitting there trying to sabotage. Nobody's sitting there doing backdoor complaints and all the rest of this stuff. There's no passive resistance. This is what it means to disagree and commit. And if Bezos is going ahead and doing this, you can probably be sure that if this works to build $1 trillion company, it probably should be something that maybe you can also go ahead and incorporate in your own company. Another thing that Bezos went ahead and realized actually is that when he spoke first in meetings, every single one of his junior employees, or in other words, anybody who was less senior to him, would be very afraid to speak afterwards, and for good reason. After all, this is Jeff Bezos we're talking about. And so, what they ended up doing was implementing a policy that ensured that it was actually the most junior employees that spoke first. They would voice their decisions and they would slowly move up the seniority chain until finally you got to Jeff Bezos, who, as a leader, again, is sitting back, listening, using this human capital that he went ahead and hired and is paying with financial capital to express great decisions and lead the organization in a certain way. And so make sure that you let your junior members speak first, and then the senior members can speak last. Just make sure that all opinions are represented, and these people that you went ahead and hired to steer the direction of your company are actually able to do that. Once you have actually gone ahead and gotten really good at making decisions and growing your company, there's a few other things that you have to keep in mind. And there's three things we're going to talk about here. First one is ownership. Okay. And so you want to make sure that you're giving your team credit for the work that they do. Elon is very famous for this. I mean, I'll watch him get on stage in front of SpaceX and nonstop give all of the credit to his team for everything that they're doing. However, if anything is to ever go bad in the company, he is the first one to take responsibility and say, "Hey, I did not do a good enough of a job. I want to make sure that we do a better job in the future." So remember that people's ownership in these firms must be real. You have to let them make decisions. You have to let them actually be rewarded for the successes that come from that, because that's how you go ahead and build a great team. Second thing is you need a great structure of accountability. Okay, and one of the ways that you're going to do this is by being accountable first and foremost as a leader. Let me put it like this: when you are a leader of a company, you are the model of success. Okay, you are the model of behavior. You are the thing that everybody looks toward for an understanding of like how should I act and how should I behave here. And so let me give you an example. If you decide that it's okay to show up to work every single day late, 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, what you are doing is telling everybody else that it is okay to go ahead and show up to work a little bit late. If you decide that it is okay to tell people that, hey, I'm going to have this done by Friday, and then all of a sudden you don't get it done by Friday, and now on Monday you're turning it in, what you are telling people is that it is okay for them to also go ahead and skip their deadlines. And this is really, really important to get right. Remember that you are going to be a model of behavior. And the other thing that's important on the deadline side is if you are not good at figuring out how long it takes you to go ahead and get a deadline together, you need to still get it done because it is nobody else's burden to bear but your own. If you are not good at predicting how long it is going to take you to go ahead and do XYZ project, the issue is not the project itself, but the fact that you're not good enough at predicting that. And so you're going to sit there, make sure that you stick to the deadline that you went ahead and did. I don't care if you got to stay up all damn night to do it. But this is really, really important to go ahead and building accountability. And eventually, the goal is to get better at project management. So, in other words, the thing that you need to get better at is understanding how long it's going to take you. And eventually, as long as you stick to this, you're going to get pretty good understanding of, hey, I think it's going to be 5 days. I think it's going to be 6 days. I think it's going to be seven. However long it is, make sure you stick to that. Your accountability is going to, spread throughout the entire organization. And so you have to stay accountable. Another thing that you want to make sure is that as a leader, you are almost a stoic. In other words, that no matter what is happening in the organization, that you go ahead and keep a calm, cool, collected attitude. This is something that I actually learned very early on when I was working at a shipping company. And one of the people there went ahead and told me that when people ask how you're doing, if things are going great, you say you're doing okay. And if things are going really, really poorly, you say you're doing okay. And as a general concept, remember that all of your team, your entire company, your entire organization, your investors, everybody that's involved is going to be looking at you as a leader for some sort of understanding of how things are going. And you need to be able to go ahead and reflect that. If you are scared, if you are raising your voice, if you are flustered, everybody else is going to think that they should be flustered too. And so you want to make sure that you remain calm and collected and stoic whenever you're leading a great company, because your behavior and your stoicism is then again going to trickle down to everybody else in the organization. So let's go ahead and dive into a few other advanced leadership techniques here. And this is one of my favorite ones, and one that I use quite a bit actually, which is something that we call the inclusion imperative. That might be a bit of a confusing name. So at its core, what we're referring to is just making sure that when you decide to move in a certain direction, that everybody is on board, that you've gotten everybody's opinions on what the right course of action is, and that you let people know that, hey, I'm not going to leave you behind. This is amazing, and this is something that's going to build loyalty in your team like nothing you've ever seen before. So the way to go about doing this is pretty straightforward. You're gonna go ahead and gather everybody's opinions on things. You're gonna ask for their best advice at solving the problem, because keep in mind these people are typically a lot closer to the actual problem than you might be. Then you're gonna go ahead and tell them that, hey, I consulted a bunch of experts, and this is what their course of action or what their recommended course of action was. What do you think about that path? And by the way, you're not just asking questions to ask questions. You really want to go ahead and incorporate some of this feedback. Again, you're not hiring them to tell them what to do. You hired them so that they can tell you what to do. Okay. So this is another really important thing to keep in mind. After you get their feedback, you want to just let them know that, hey, I'm not going to unfairly disadvantage anybody here. And so I'm only going to move forward with this if everybody's in accordance, and we're not going to leave anybody behind in that process. And what you end up finding is that when you do decide to move forward with a decision, with a pivot, with something that's large, for example, like asking every single person on your team to create content, what ends up happening is that you find that everybody actually moves together, and that there is no longer any sort of resistance to you choosing that path that you want to take. So it's important to get people's buy-in, make sure that they feel heard, make sure that you know that you're still there for them. And even though you're sitting there on this journey to make money and do all the rest, that you're not going to unfairly disadvantage them. And as long as you do that, you're going to build an incredibly loyal team of team members, which are really going to be there through thick and thin with you. In the same way, this also kind of appeals or relates to something we call the push leadership model. And really what this comes down to is you can imagine two graphics. In the one, you have a king, which basically points a certain direction and says, hey, everybody move there. And in another, you have the same group of people, but instead of the king sitting there pointing at the front and telling people where to go, you actually have the king who's sitting there behind and actually pushing with everybody else. And this is a much more effective way for leaders to go ahead and get their team's loyalty and approval and trust. And it shows them that, hey, I'm one of you. I'm sitting here in the trenches with you guys. Regardless of my title, I am not removed from this, right? Like, this is something that I'm going to sit there and work on with you guys. Another thing that you want to do is go ahead and actually build a leadership pipeline early. And so you want to go ahead and keep in mind when you're hiring people, and regardless of what position they are, does this person have what it takes to be a really great leader? And if they do, you really want to go ahead and start training those people and moving them up the ladder and doing the things that will allow your company to outlast you. Because at the end of the day, you do not want your company to die whenever you die. You want this to be something that goes on for a very long time. And building leaders and doing that internally is actually a really great way to do it. One of the final ways to go ahead and really create some advanced leadership within your organization is something that a lot of people do not do, but it's what we call the human element. And what it refers to is just remembering that business is not always strictly business. You know, one of my favorite things to remember actually is that a company is no more than just your company around you. In other words, if you have two people, you have a couple, and if you have a three, now you have some company with you. And so your company is not this LLC or this C corp or your standard operating procedures or whatever else you have going for you. Your company is the team of people that you have together. It's the group of individuals that sit there and fight for a thing on a daily basis. And so remember that it's not this concrete thing. It's not a legal structure. It's really just a group of people all sitting there working towards an end goal. And so inevitably you cannot completely remove the human aspect from that. Your team will have days where they are not happy, where there are family emergencies, where things are going seriously wrong for people. And remember that everybody that you hire, they have their own dreams and they have their own struggles too. And so remember to care for your employees as human beings. And when you do that, when you sit there and just call them to check in on how they're doing and how their family is and how their kids are doing, and if they have anything that that you can do better, I promise you these people are going to sit there and be involved with you and want to move mountains for you. Okay, because they're really going to sit there and say, wow, no other leader has ever done this for me. I finally feel like home. I finally feel like I'm in a place where this person gives me a lot, and so I'm going to give them even more back. Okay, it's the principle of reciprocity. If you need help with managing your team, if you need help with getting people on board, if you want to figure out how to trust your team and how to lead them and how to make great decisions, go ahead, book a one-on-one workshop with us over at Thinkk, and we will go ahead and do everything we can to make sure that you absolutely nail the management of your brand new company. And so, in addition to that, I'm also going to go ahead and leave a whole bunch of other educational materials somewhere around here. Maybe it's in a bio or maybe it's in a description or something, just so you can continue to learn at absolutely zero additional cost to you. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to learn about management as we see it over here at Thinkk. I appreciate you very much for bopping in. I hope that you learned a little bit about how to lead your team, how to trust them fully, and the importance of actually putting a lot of trust in your team, and also what it's like to make great decisions in your organization. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a real honor to be able to make these videos for you, and I appreciate you sticking around till the end. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.